I'm the president-elect. I'm filling in for President Paul Hoffman, who's at the Brewers game today. So hopefully it'll bring home a win, right? Thanks for joining us. Today's meeting is sponsored by Paul Hoffman, Kathy Bloomreich, Aaron Embry, and Tara Grays. And thank you for Monona Bank. I think that should be a new policy. If the president misses the meeting, they have to sponsor the meeting. That's a good policy, right? Our opening music today we're going to start with the four-way test. So let's start with by reciting the four-way test of the things we think, do, and say. Number one, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. And remain standing for our patriotic song. Angela Bartell will lead us in singing America the Beautiful with Jeff Bartell on piano. And then Angela will lead us in singing our featured song, Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. And then our guest will be introduced by Oscar Morales.
America the Beautiful. Oh, beautiful for spacious sky, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee. With brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Good work and thank you. Be seated, please. Well, it is a beautiful morning, so let's give voice to it. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. The corn is as high as an elephant's eye, and it looks like it's climbing clear up to the sky. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a wonderful feeling. Everything's going my way. All the sounds of the earth are like music. All the sounds of the earth are like music. The breeze is so busy, it don't miss a tree. And an old weeping willow is laughing at me. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a wonderful feeling. Everything's going my way. Hey, oh, what a beautiful day. Good work, everyone.
Okay, Oscar.
One more round of applause for Angela and Jeff Bartell and this wonderful music all the way from Tucson. We have a number of guests here, and we're going to ask that the guests remain standing while I go through the list. We have Carolyn Casey, the guest of Mike Casey. Ricardo Blank, the guest of Herman Bauman. Janet Dyer, whose daughter plays in the Australia Baseball League, guest of the Goodman Rotary Advisory Committee. Christine Reed, Goodman Rotary Advisory Committee. Mindy Vinci from the Advisory Committee. Richie Brown from the Program Committee. Larry Littlegeorge from the Program Committee. Diana Gonzalez, the love of my life. Tracy Anderson, guest of Aurelia Estrada, who came late, don't come late. Jean Novick with guest of Jeff Bartel. Eileen Rapson, guest of Maggie Porter-Kretz. Lori Morris, guest of Jim Cole. Terry Venker, guest of Jim Cole. And Jacqueline Hunt, guest of Charles McLyman. And Araceli Esparza, guest of Charles McLyman. Let's give a big round of applause for our visiting guests and Rotarians.
Thank you, Oscar, and welcome to all of our guests. August 17th is Bring a Child to Rotary Day, and Ashley Quinto-Paul, who is a member of the Second Century Fellowship Group and a member of our program committee, has an announcement about our upcoming meeting. Ashley.
Thank you, Charles. I'm glad this is such a serious meeting. Does everyone like my shoes? Yes. Thank you. So August 17th is one of the best Rotary meetings of the year. It's invite your child or grandchild to Rotary. It's such an amazing opportunity for us to show the younger generation all the amazing things that we do. And so we've invited a special guest, Jennifer Javornik from Filament Games. So honest answers. Who knew that Wisconsin is a mecca for video game development? Oh, okay. Well, Jennifer is the VP of sales for one of the prominent studios in Madison, and you should bring and she's a brilliant speaker. She's a children's book author, and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to have even better shoes than this. And my kids will be here. I hope yours will too, and your grandkids. My kids have a bonkers sense of style, like even more wild than mine, and maybe even a little better. So I look forward to seeing your children and your grandchildren. And if you don't have one of those, you might bring a niece or a nephew or a neighbor, or randomly pick up children and bring them to lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. And I think we could have a wildest shoe contest that day. Ashley, you'd probably win. Oh, okay. Next, we have another report in our series on Women in Rotary. We're celebrating the 35th anniversary of Women in Rotary in our club this month. 2 weeks ago, Rich Leffler gave us a wonderful history of Women in Rotary. And then last week, past President Susan Schmitz told us about a number of firsts of Women in Rotary in our club. Today, our Rotary Information Subcommittee Chair, Charlie Bertou, is going to provide us with the final report in our series on Women in Rotary.
Today we have a video from the new president of Rotary International, Jennifer Jones. Some of you might have seen the article, the interview with her in the Rotary magazine a month or two ago. I read that through and was really impressed with her leadership, with her creativity, with her energy, with her fresh ideas. So we thought it would be great to have her do a Hello Madison, Wisconsin video, but don't get your hopes up. She's too busy and we weren't able to arrange that. The best we get is a generic but heartfelt and appropriate video from her offering words of encouragement. I have to admit, I'm a relatively new Rotarian. I was a little bit surprised to learn that women have been part of Rotary for 35 years, and she's the first female president of Rotary International. But we all know, the big boats take time to change direction. Institutions change slowly. So I realized I'm glad to be part of an organization that's open to change, open to rethinking things and making progress in all sorts of ways. So I'm glad to be part of Rotary, where we're making progress towards inclusion. We still have some work to do, but we're heading in the right direction. Let's listen to what Jennifer has to say.
Greetings, my friends. It is my great honor to send you goodwill and good wishes from Rotary leadership and all across the family of Rotary. Rotary's core values, our traditions, our heritage, these are powerful things that we hold true and yet build upon as we imagine how we can be so much more. When an organization like ours dreams big things like ending polio and creating peace, it becomes our responsibility to make these dreams a reality. We imagine a world that deserves our best, where we get up each day knowing that we can make a difference. By telling our story and aspiring to do more each day, we imagine Rotary. Thank you for playing an important role in this effort. Together, there's no limit to what we can achieve.
Thank you, Charlie, and congratulations to International President Jennifer Jones. I also want to let you know that Lynn Kenny, a former member of our Rotary Club, has created a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation about the history of women in Rotary, and that's available on YouTube. There are some cards out at the button box with more information, and you can pick one up on your way out. Next up, we have Joyce Bromley. And Joyce is chair of our member recognition subcommittee. Would you please come up and make a special recognition of a member?
Each year, our club recognizes up to 6 members for their service to our Rotary Club in one of 5 avenues of service, service to the club, service to the community, service to the international community, to vocational service, and to youth service. Today, we award the Rotary Club of Madison 2022 Youth Service Award to Oscar Morales. Oscar has been a member of the Rotary Club of Madison for 14 years. Anyone who knows Oscar knows that he is passionate about helping young people achieve their educational goals. He has been executive director of Omega School for the past 28 years, where he has helped thousands of young adults achieve their GED certificates. He has been executive director of the Omega School for the past 28 years, whereas he held, I just said that. For the past 7 years, Oscar has been a member of our Rotary Scholarship Committee, which requires extensive volunteer time each year, and he has served on this committee for 7 years. Each year, he has read over 35 lengthy scholarship applications. He has helped conduct the student interviews, and he has helped select recipients for our annual 4-year college scholarship program. But he did not stop there. He has not left the students at the doorstep, because most of the scholarship recipients are the first in their families to attend college. Oscar has mentored several of our Rotary scholars to help them navigate through their college years. As well, Oscar is currently serving as a trustee of the Madison Rotary Foundation. Oscar makes a huge difference in our community and to our club. To recognize his service above self, our Rotary Club Board of Directors acknowledge him as the one of our 2022 Rotary Club of Madison Youth Service Award recipients. With that recognition, our club has made a $200 contribution in Oscar's name to the Madison Rotary, the Rotary Foundation of International Rotary. Oscar, please come forward to receive a special certificate and a pin, and to recognize you for our club's Youth Service Award as we offer our congratulations. No, there's a pin.
No speech, right?
Congratulations, Oscar. Felicidades. Very well deserved and well earned. Okay, next up we have some birthdays to celebrate with a bit of humor and wisdom that complements Rotary's mission. We also encourage members to make an age-appropriate gift to the Madison Rotary Foundation, rounded up to 100 for our club's Synergy Scholarship Fund. On July 24th, Lynn Sexton, and if you're in the room, please stand. Lynn Sexton, past President Roth Judd, July 25th. July 26th, Sandy Morales. July 29th, Jennifer Weitzman. July 30th, Dewey Bredesen. July 30th, Kaleem Kerr. And July 30th, Rebecca Prohaska. Thanks to all of our celebrants for their contribution to the Madison Rotary Foundation. And please join in singing them happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rotarians. Happy birthday to you. All right. Thank you, Jeff. And now we have members in the news. Jason Ilstrup was quoted recently in an article entitled, UW Shares $6 Million Concept to Dramatically Reimagine the Library Mall. Great article, Jason. And as many of you know, our colleague, fellow Rotarian Brian Baskin hasn't been able to attend our meetings lately. His son, Matthew, was in a serious accident in Minneapolis back in May, and Matthew had been in ICU for many weeks. He is continuing to recover in a rehabilitation center in Chicago, but please continue to keep Brian and his family in your thoughts and prayers. Matthew is making very good progress. There's a photo of him that you can see. Great, thanks everybody. Next up, we have our program, and today's speaker is Dr. Gary Maier. Dr. Maier is a forensic psychiatrist with transcultural interest. He's worked for 31 years at Mendota Mental Health Institute, and that's where he became familiar with the Effigy Mounds on the property. In 2001, he published a book describing his interpretation of the meaning of the major mounds at Mendota Mental Health Institute. We're looking forward to your presentation, Dr. Maier. And we also welcome today guests that were introduced earlier, but Richie Brown and Larry Littlejohn. We're happy to have you here who are members of the Ho-Chunk Nation. We're looking forward to your presentation, Dr. Maier, and we've made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way of saying thanks to you for speaking with us today. I also want to mention that if there's time, we hope to have Q&A afterwards with the speaker, and you'll wait for the person to bring a microphone to you. I think that's Ron Luskin. And if you have questions, and then remember the Rotary four-way test for questions as well. Dr. Maier, welcome.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. I need to thank my son-in-law, Marcio Sierra. He's a pastor. He's the one who suggested that I make a plan to make this talk, and then for Charles for accepting it. Marcio can't be here today because he's in Colorado Springs at a pastor's convention. So today we are going to focus on two mounds groups to get the idea that these are earth monuments that have many dimensions to them. So, and I think I'm going to learn how to use this. Yeah, there we go. We're going to really look at conical and linear mounds and effigy mounds. The other types of mounds won't be addressed today, but the people lived in conical houses and long houses, and their burials and the artifacts in their burials were essentially placed in conical mounds and linear mounds. Across the state, this is really the heartland of effigy mounds building, or the effigy culture. They built mounds in the effigy form from about 750 AD to about 1250 AD, plus or minus 100 years. At that time, the Ho-Chunk and other nations indigenous to the state were divided into clans, and the clans were the upper region, birds, and the lower region, water and earth. And so we're going to see how at both sites we have representatives from each of the major divisions. We're going to look at the Blackhawk Country Club. We have golfers in the room, and some of you have golfed on that golf course. As part of the Bicentennial Project, 1976, Marquardt, kind of a character there, got the board of directors to preserve the mounds and get them registered on the state historic, or the National Historic Sites registry, and that was accomplished. Then, way across the lake, where it says burial and eagles, we have the mounds on the north shore of the lake. Of course, when Madison first opened, that was a long way away, and that's where they put the mental hospital. So you'll remember when we came into the state in 1848, the big population was in Milwaukee, and they lost out to Madison. Madison not only got the state capitol, it got the state university, and it got the state mental hospital. And thanks to the mentally ill, they have preserved the effigies on the grounds of Mendota Mental Health Institute, just as golfers have preserved the mounds on the Blackhawk Country Club. Governor Nelson's making a small contribution across the lake, preserving a small number there. The reason why that's important is this area was really the heartland of the Effigy Mounds culture. This was the culture that was really Ho-Chunk land. And unfortunately, in 1849, the Iowans stole the Effigy Mounds National Monument from us. In other words, while our farmers were plowing down the mounds on their grounds, the Iowans had a group of mounds along the high ridge on the west side of the Mississippi that wasn't good farmland, and so they got President Truman ultimately to declare that as the Effigy Mounds National Monument. Well, some of us think there should at least be a Wisconsin division to that monument, and so that's one of the things that we're having some thoughts about. Okay, these are the 11 of the 12 mounds on the grounds at the Country Club and Shorewood. And the one in the middle there is an eagle, or sorry, it is a goose, and it's a famous goose. It's well recognized throughout Effigy, the Effigy culture. So if we just quickly look at these mounds, you'll see that there are, and I hope this works, there are, right there, 3 conical mounds, probably burials for the 3 bears, 3 linear mounds, a water spirit mound, and then this big goose. In front of the goose, there used to be a hawk. It was destroyed in 1920 when they rearranged the golf course. What's important about that goose is that, I'm going to just have to, is that if you stand behind the goose and look at its flight plan, because it's flying up a hill, you'll see the sunset on the hilltop. It is pointing to a winter solstice sunset. So it has a meaningful alignment. And since this is a non-clan effigy, they were able to use it to introduce 2 ideas. There are 2 types of time, cyclic time. There's the day-night cycle, and then there's seasonal cycle. Well, this is flying into the night sky, and it's flying at the time when fall turns to winter. And so what's that goose going to do? It's going to disappear. So they put the high concept of migration into that construction. And so it will disappear into the night sky, and it will disappear for the winter, and then it'll come back in the spring. So it will have the death rebirth motif surrounding it. And then if you extend that line back, it goes right through the bears. So here's, male bears are bigger than female bears. This is the dad, this is the mom, and then there's a little cub, and the cub is walking due east into an equinox sunrise. What happens to bears at the beginning of winter? Well, they also disappear. They hibernate. So in this construction, we have migration and hibernation as ethological adaptations to the season built in to the way these mounds are placed on the ground. So while the goose identifies the end of fall and the beginning of winter, the cub identifies the end of winter and the beginning of spring. So 3 of the 4 seasons are recorded here. Now, most of us have forgotten that bears mate in the late spring, that the ova remain dormant until the fall, then they grow in the female, and so that the female enters the den pregnant, and the cubs are born in the den. So the earth actually becomes a place of birth for bears. Now, I can't say the Ho-Chunk words for January and February, but the Ho-Chunk words mean first bear born, that's January, and last bear born, that's February. They're born right in that period of time. So what they've shown in this is that it's likely that there are burials here, at least one, with artifacts that would be required on the journey to the spirit world that are about the Bear Clan. And just as the Bear Clan animal is born in the earth and then born to the natural world, so the souls of the deceased are born in the earth, but to the spirit world. All right. How we doing? Hanging in? Okay. So now we go over to Mendota Mental Health Institute, which is well studied. And so after the Civil War, so first of all, the state hospital came online in 1860, just in time for the Civil War. They'd moved a few mentally ill people in. They moved them out. It became a hospital for the convalescing soldiers. But then, after the war, the mentally ill moved back. And there was an interest in the mounds. So there are conical mounds up and down the Mississippi and around the Gulf. But these are effigy mounds. Effigy, French. Portraits of animals. It was the French that got here first, Marquette, Joliet, and so it's not surprising that the word effigy is applied to these. So we have Reverend Pete, a minister, who was trying to understand the mounds because there were many theories that the mounds were built by the lost tribes of Israel and, blah, blah, blah. The fact is they were built by the ancestors of the people that lived here. In this diagram, you can see there is a eastern group and a middle group and a western group. This group, the eastern group, are destroyed. But here's how, here's something we need to note. See, these are thunderbirds, 5 of them. And then there are 2 wolves or foxes, just one with a tail. And then the geometry here is like north-south to a conical mound here. But a reputable surveyor by the name of Lewis came by 3 years later, and he helped clarify the actual the forms of the mounds. There were actually 3 thunderbirds, 2 adults and a child, and there were 2 wolves or foxes with tails, one without a tail. So if you don't have a tail, you probably haven't entered into adulthood. And you can see the geometry here is quite different because what we have at the top here is a conical mound that seems to be at the apex of a lot of this. So here's a motif that we find around this lake, and we find at other sites, 2 adults and a child. A generational model where birth from one generation is followed by the second. Now these mounds are destroyed. There's a remnant of this eagle in the in the front yard of the lady and guy that live on Woodward and Harper. We have now surveyed these mounds and the remnants, and we've offered people a chance to add an effigy mound to their property. Some have wanted to do that, some haven't. What we have next to it, though, so those mounds would have been right over here, is we have the middle group and we have the western group. So in 1985, I asked Professor Schurz of the engineering department to do an aerial survey. So we have a land drawing, we have a land survey, and now we have an aerial survey. And the aerial survey locked in this equinox line. In other words, on this day, light and dark are equal. This line passes between the tips of the wings of these 2 large eagles, along the feet of a 4-legged deer, and through a large conical mound on the highest part of the property that was excavated and showed that there were 3 people buried in it, 2 adults and a child. So things in an equinox line are in balance, are symmetrical, are the same. What you have over here is birth. If you let these 2 large eagles fly, the one at the north, at the top, if I can get this on there, will bump into the one in the middle. So most of you know that lady eagles are bigger than male eagles. Lady eagles have a bigger wingspan and they weigh more. So the one in the middle there, the big one with the 624-foot wingspan, is the mom. The one at the top, which is the second largest eagle effigy, is a male, and then there's the offspring. So if these eagles took off, this guy would bump into this lady, And most of us know, because Sauk City's just up the way, that eagles have a phenomenal acrobatic mating dance. And they fly around, but eventually the male is able to, see if I can get this right. We'll just do this one time back. There we go. The male finally approaches the female from above and behind, the same way they've laid it out on the ground. Now, there is also a four-legged deer there. Now, if I can go back, oh, look at that, I can go back. So here we have the main group. Again, the motif, 2 adults and a child, if I can get this thing working. And at the bottom in these little square patches, you also have 3 bears. This is the dad bear, this is the mama bear, and then this is the little cub, pattern 2 adults and a child. The bears were the soldiers for the land group in the Effigy culture, and so there's probably some protective function that they're providing. But you see up here, we've got, if I can see, can you see that 4-legged deer? We're going to look at it a little more carefully. That deer's walking between the tips of the wings of the 2 big eagles. And over here we have a panther. Now, it's a superlative. It had the longest tail of a water spirit mound, 610 feet. We've chopped it off because it got in the way of our construction. But there were no panthers in Wisconsin. There were water spirits. In fact, the lizard is the closest animal to a water spirit, and that's why we have Lizard State Park over near Milwaukee. But the 4-legged deer bears some extra looking. So here is a stout survey of that deer. It's got clearly 4 legs. It's clearly walking east. The question was, is it a male or female? Because they couldn't tell from the remnants whether, in fact, there were antlers here or not. Were these the ears or were these the antlers? Fortunately, in Pete's book, he has DeHart's description of that deer, and it does have antlers. So it's actually a male. So what you know is that any animal that has a seasonal change in their morphology in the annual solar cycle is magical. And so for deer, they lose their antlers and they grow back, and they lose their antlers and they grow back. So historically, the snake has been the number 1 animal that is used to represent health. In fact, in every culture but the monotheistic cultures, the snake is a symbol of health. So for the Greeks, you have Asclepius, the first physician, and he has a staff, and around it is a snake. And then you finally get the caduceus, 2 snakes wrapped around each other. Well, for other cultures, the deer, the stag, had that same function. So what we have then is this deer playing a key role, walking between the tips of the wings of the bird into an equinox sunrise. Now, there are 2 directions in that deer. First of all, its feet are pointing to the north, and then when it would stand up, it would move to the north, and then it would walk east. North to east, if I've got this right, would be, see in this, these are like sets. Things work clockwise in the northern hemisphere. So if you're in the southern hemisphere on your cruise, the water in the toilet goes around counterclockwise. You probably all noticed that and thought it was kind of cute. But the water in our toilets goes clockwise. So everything in the northern hemisphere is from, it moves clockwise. So you can see that that deer is going from winter to spring. That is, it's a spring equinox. It's not a fall equinox. So they were aware of that, and they just coded that into the position of the deer. So now we're going to move from what is, you would say, would be mating and birth and regeneration with the sunrise. So they're letting the sun be the directive to give this dynamic direction. And we're going to follow that line over to this conical mound that was excavated in 1885 by Dr. DeHart, the superintendent of the hospital. This is how that mound looks today. It's been cut off, but here's how he left that diagram. So what we have here is a classic mound. This is earth. There's a stone chamber filled with 2 layers of stone. It's in an odd shape, and there are 2 adults and a child with an oval of stones in the middle. So they laid the stones, they put in the corpses that are seated, facing west, setting sun, and packed them in dirt, built the rest of the stone chamber. And so if you look at that for a while, you'll realize this is kind of like a bowl inside a bigger bowl. Or for dentists, it's an upside-down molar. But they're looking west. So To the east, we have the sunrise and birth, and now in the west, we have the souls looking to their ultimate destination, and that is to the setting sun and their birth into the spirit world. Now, one might assume that people could make the connection that the two big eagles and the little eagle could represent like the grave marker for these two adults and a child, and therefore these would be from the eagle clan. There's a further clue. If you think of this as a bowl, then this becomes a stone nest, and then this little guy, these stones become an egg, and the egg isn't situated in the nest, it's in the grave, because these deceased are born from a symbolic egg into the spirit world, which for the eagle clan is in the air. So we have birth in the east, and we have death in the west. There's a lot more going on here, but I don't have time for that. But over on, at the golf course, you have the same general motif, and that is we have two adults and a child, and eventually with ground penetrating radar, we're going to be able to find at least one deceased person. They'll be facing west. And then finally across the way, we have, see the 4 conical mounds that are in a line? There's a big one. Kids used to ride their motorbikes over it because they could get a real thrill bouncing up and down. So they are the old group. They're right down by the water, and these are water spirit burials, but you wouldn't know that until they came by, developed effigy technology, and they placed a water spirit adult at the top and an adult at the bottom and a little one in the middle, the same 2 adults and a child motif. And then if you notice, they placed a conical mound that is not in the straight line, and then you'll notice that in the tail, they've curved that tail. This is a site where there were old burials, and then effigy technology came along, and then they added it in, and they showed us that they'd put in a later burial by curving the tail of the other, of the one water spirit. So, around Lake Mendota, you have the mentally ill protecting an air clan, the eagles. The golfers are protecting a land clan, and that is the bears. And then at Governor Nelson, we have the water spirits that are semi-protected. That all said, this was literally a center of the Effigy Mounds culture. This is sort of like a valley of the dead. Key burials all around the lake. There were other burials. I'm just focusing on these just to kind of raise your consciousness that these aren't just lumps of earth placed on the ground in a non-random way, but they're actually statements in the theology based on the clan animal. And in our interpretive model, we use not just the positioning of the mounds, but we align the meaning with the direction that the sun can give or that the flow of a river can give. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if we have time.
Thank you very much for this, Dr. Maier. If one wants to observe these in the best way, is there a plan or a guide for doing that?
That's a really good question. So first of all, I don't know if there are any destination Madison people here, but cultural tourism has become big across the world. The problem that you and I face is that this is not our heritage. It's the heritage of the Ho-Chunk. And therefore, the enthusiasm that we might have to want to, let's say, learn more about them and whatnot, still has to be integrated with the Ho-Chunk. And that's why I'm pleased that Richie and Larry have joined us today, because I wanted them to hear this version of how a white guy who's a retired Catholic, whose sister was a nun, I mean, like it just goes on and on. We had the spirit in our family. We just had to let it go as time went on. However, somewhere in there you could get my name or an email, and I have these written now as papers, and there is a way we're going to try to set up where we could have an organized tour, especially to the mounds and the grounds of Mendota, because they have security because of the forensic program. A car drives by. We've got a lot of grave robbers out there, and we've had losses to them. So that's the long answer to the.
Well, as you said, you're a white Catholic guy who doesn't have this culture. Where do the stories come from? How do you figure out these stories? Because you could easily make different stories. The bears might be rats or something like that. How do you get these stories figured out?
So another good question. So first of all, there's a lot of written documentation by people like Pete and others who talked with the local Native Americans at the time to sort of, let's say, clarify what the form meant. So there's not really much debate about whether a bear mound is a bear mound, but there are some that are very difficult to determine, and they just have to remain a mystery. When you say stories, we really are dependent on the bigger picture for the addition of cultural stories that are associated with each site. If I had more time, I would tell you the story of the meaning of the Lake Mendota and how it fits into this pattern, but that's beyond here. So I think Larry and Richie eventually will be able to help us on that.
We're over here next.
Okay.
I have a question about the excavation of the mounds.
Yes.
Do you find any difference in what's inside the mounds depending upon what the animal represents?
Well, so I don't know the answer to that specifically, but because most of these are burial mounds, just excavating them desecrates them. And the one thing that we've had in a couple of places, of which DeHart, to his credit, at least left us some recognizable documentation of what he found. He excavated a second mound and he found what he called an altar, a stone maybe 3 by 5 feet resting on other stones, and there was ash on top, clearly a part of a sacrifice. We expect that in some mounds there'll be artifacts that are associated with the journey into the spirit world, but I don't know whether there are bear artifacts specifically in a bear mound.
Mark, I think Linda Baldwin's next.
Thank you. On the north side of Lake Mendota, on Lakeland Avenue, there are a series of mounds as well. Bob Birmingham did some work on that.
Yep.
Are those a part of the same cultural group?
Yes. Yes. So all around the 4 lakes, there were major burials. The isthmus was literally a library of information. There were hundreds of mounds, all destroyed. Fortunately, there are a number of diagrams and so on. I would say Bob Birmingham is probably the senior, let's say, authority on the archaeological aspects of these. Professor Schurz is probably the authority on the alignments associated with them because he's surveyed over 100 groups and his maps are now going into the public domain. What neither of them really do in any overt way is they don't add the ethological change in the animal, which you can see, migration and hibernation, and they don't seem to add in the role of the role function of the clan animal. And so those are some things that we've tried to add in. Mind you, we say plainly, we don't have a record of what the people believed at the time. So we're using kind of general symbolism to try to add in a meaning that at least shows that they were important, even if we don't understand them the way they intended they be used.
Over here, sir.
Uh-huh.
Hi, I'm wondering about if you have any more explanation for the presence of the Panther at the North Mendota site.
Yes. So I didn't have a chance to go through the topographical lines, but if you were to be out in the lake, remember we had open oak forest, much like they've restored over at Governor Nelson. That means prairie grass with periodic oak trees because the bark on the oak tree could survive a prairie fire, whereas most of the others couldn't. And so a young climax forest would die off with prairie fires. You could see that the Panther Mound or the Water Spirit Mound from the lake or from what's called the Old Indian Trail that runs right along the edge of the cliff. And it acts as a kind of a guardian. So it would be a way that anybody canoeing or anybody walking near the lake looking at the mounds would know that this is sacred ground or to be respectful. And it's because it's on a hill rise and with the tail curling around.
Thank you for the presentation. The the people who are buried, are they clan leaders, and the non-leaders, were they interred differently?
So if you got a stone tomb, you were definitely an important person, a chief or a chiefess or a medicine person. So that part is well documented. A common way that people were buried was they were defleshed. Then there was a bone bundle. We've seen in movies how in some graveyards the skeletons are laid out on a platform up in the air so that they are naturally defleshed. And then they took the long bones, the ones that would be used for walking and movement, and they tied them into what was called a bone bundle. And the family would carry the bone bundle with them. It had a place in the home for it to be placed. And then every 3 years, or every 4 years, or roughly, there would be a burial ceremony, and all the bone bundles would be placed in a common burial pit. The Jesuits over in Huronia, where I lived, I'm a Canadian first, were able to attend the burial of several hundred bone bundles in a 4-day ceremony there, and it's well documented. So that is one way that was that let's say that everybody got buried. if you were a head honcho, you got a special grave on the highest part of the land, you know, with the biggest mound.
I'll ask a question, sir. Are there any other places in Wisconsin where there may be as many burial grounds?
Any aerial?
Are there other places in Wisconsin where we'd find mounds as numerous as we have?
Oh, yeah, they're all across Wisconsin. The lower two-thirds of the state going into the upper part of Illinois, over to the west of the Mississippi in Illinois and Minnesota, that would be the section where effigy mounds were placed. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Very interesting. It's the reason we came today, to hear you. We have some land out in Iowa County. Is there someone who could come help us walk the land to see if there's a mound on our property?
There is. And there's two ways to go about this. Most counties have a state historical society, and that's one way that you can ask, and they will know who to connect with. And the other would be to actually contact the Ho-Chunk themselves, and they might be able to provide you with some information about mounds in that area or mounds on your specific land. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll turn it back to Charles.
Thank you, Dr. Maier, for that very interesting talk. Gary has told me that if people were interested, he could take a group of Rotarians to tour the Mendota Mental Health Mounds. So that's something that we could arrange. So I hope you join us next week back here at the Park Hotel, when our speaker will be Wisconsin State archaeologist Jim Skibo, who will share details about the Mendota dugout canoe, its discovery, recovery, and restoration. Did you think Richie could say a word here? Yes, we have a minute. Yes? Sure. Welcome, Richie.
Well, I moved kind of slow. Yesterday I turned 69, so I hate to admit it, but I'm getting older. So what Gary's been working on, documenting all this, is part of a bigger picture, and that's if you cross the river at the Prairie du Chien, there's the Effigy Mounds National Monument. And what Gary was proposing is that we apply for recognition here in Madison to either extend the national monument over here or create a new monument here in Wisconsin, because all the way up the Wisconsin River, it's full of effigy mounds. You can go up to Wisconsin all the way to the headwaters in Lac Vieux des Airs. There's an island there, and that's where the Wisconsin starts. There's an island out there that's got effigy mounds on that. So And then if you go through the portage and go up into the Keweenaws, there's mounds up there too. So they're all along, they're in the area, it's full of them. So we are the home of the Effigy Mounds, and we've been recognized for that for a long time. And I think it's a great idea, and that's Saturday, this coming Saturday, we have the Ho-Chunk has our general council here in Madison, and one of the resolutions we want to get on the agenda is to forward Gary's idea that we create a national monument here for the Effigy Mounds. Thank you.
So that would be very exciting. You can come back and tell us about it when it's established. Great. And with that, we are adjourned.